My name is Marisol. I'm 32 years old, and I've learnt that people often judge your worth by what they think, you do not, who you actually are. My in-laws were masters at this game, constantly undermining me because they believed I didn't have a real job. Little did they know what was waiting for them that special night at the luxury restaurant downtown. The look on their faces when the waiter handed me the bill with a respectful, "As usual, Madam Owner," was absolutely priceless. If you've ever been underestimated, let me know where you're watching from and hit that like and subscribe button. Trust me, you're going to enjoy how this story unfolds. I come from a family where food wasn't just sustenance. It was our heritage, our connection to our roots. My parents immigrated to America from Mexico before I was born, bringing with them recipes passed down through generations. Growing up, our modest home in Southern California was always filled with the rich aromas of my mother's cooking and the lively chatter of family gatherings. My earliest memories revolve around our small kitchen. At age 5, I would stand on a wooden stool beside my mother, watching intently as she prepared traditional dishes. Mija cooking is not just about feeding the body, she would say. It's about nourishing the soul. By 8, I was helping chop vegetables, my small hands carefully guided by hers. At 12, I could prepare a complete family meal on my own, beaming with pride, as relatives praised my food. My father worked as a line cook at various restaurants around town. On special weekends, he would take me to work with him, introducing me to the fast-paced world of professional kitchens. I was mesmerized by the coordination, the pressure, the artistry of it all. While other kids dreamed of becoming doctors or astronauts, I fantasized about having my own restaurant, creating spaces where people could experience the same joy food brought to my family. High school was a balancing act between academics and my passion. I worked part-time at a local diner, soaking up knowledge about running a food business. My guidance counselor suggested culinary school, but I had broader ambitions. I wanted to not just cook in a restaurant, I wanted to create and own one. This led me to pursue a degree in restaurant management at university, where I combined culinary classes with business courses. College was transformative. I interned at several high-end restaurants, working every position from dishwasher to hostess to line cook. I wanted to understand every aspect of the business. My professors noticed my determination and connected me with mentors in the industry. One summer, I landed an internship at a Michelin-starred restaurant in New York, an experience that shaped my vision of fine dining combined with the warmth and soul of home cooking. It was during my final year of college that I met Alexander. Alex was attending law school and volunteered at the same community garden project I did. We struck up a conversation over heirloom tomatoes, and when he mentioned he hadn't had a home-cooked meal in months, I invited him to dinner. I prepared my grandmother's chili rellenos, and the way his eyes lit up when he tasted them told me everything I needed to know. Alex was different from anyone I had dated before. He listened when I talked about my dreams, asked thoughtful questions, and never once suggested that wanting my own restaurant was impractical. When I got excited about a new recipe or technique, I'd learned he would sit for hours genuinely interested in every detail. His support wasn't just verbal. He helped me test recipes offered to be my business sounding board, and even accompanied me to scouting potential restaurant locations long before we had the means to pursue them. Our relationship progressed naturally. After dating for 3 years, we moved in together, turning our small apartment kitchen into my experimental lab. Alex would invite colleagues over, and I would test new dishes on them, building confidence and refining my style. When he proposed a year later, it wasn't with a fancy dinner at a restaurant, but with a simple picnic featuring all my favorite foods that he had attempted to make himself. Some were disasters, but it was the most meaningful meal of my life. After marriage, we focused on our shared goal. While Alex built his career at a law firm specializing in small business law, I worked as a sous chef at an upscale restaurant, learning the intricacies of fine dining. Every dollar we could spare went into our restaurant fund. We lived frugally, passed on vacations, and drove old cars. At night, I would sketch restaurant layouts and draft business plans, while Alex reviewed them with his legal expertise. It took 5 years of saving planning and countless meetings with banks before we secured a loan. Finding the right location was another challenge, but when I walked into the vacant space that would become La Mesa de Marisol, I knew immediately. It had large windows allowing natural light to pour in high ceilings, perfect for the warm, intimate atmosphere I envisioned, and a layout that would let guests feel both the energy of the kitchen and have private conversations. The next 8 months were a blur of renovations, permit applications, and vendor meetings. I handpicked every piece of furniture, designed lighting that would make both the food and the diners look their best, and spent weeks perfecting the menu. La Mesa de Marisol would offer elevated Latin American cuisine with modern American influences, reflecting my heritage and journey. One decision I made early on was to remain somewhat anonymous as the owner and chef. I wanted the restaurant to succeed on its merits, not because of a personality or story behind it. While locals who followed the food scene knew I was the owner, I rarely did interviews and kept a low profile. My kitchen staff and servers knew me well, of course, but to most patrons, I was simply the chef owner who occasionally emerged to greet special guests. This decision to stay behind the scenes wasn't just about the restaurant's reputation. It was also personal. I wanted my food to speak for itself. In the culinary world, especially as a woman of colour, I had often felt the need to prove myself twice over. By letting the restaurant stand on its own, I was creating something that couldn't be dismissed as a novelty or reduced to a heartwarming immigrant success story for marketing purposes. What I didn't realise was that this low profile would create complications with my new extended family, who had very different ideas about success visibility and what constituted a real job. The first time I met Alex's family was 3 months after we started dating. He warned me they could be a bit judgmental, which I soon discovered was a massive understatement. We had dinner at his parents' sprawling house in an exclusive neighborhood. From the moment I stepped inside, I felt like I was being evaluated rather than welcomed. Richard Montgomery, Alex's father, was a retired executive from a Fortune 500 company. Tall with silver hair and impeccable posture, he carried himself with the confidence of someone used to being the most important person in any room. He greeted me with a firm handshake and immediately launched into questions about my background and career plans. "So what does your father do?" was his opening question, followed by a barely concealed frown when I explained he was a cook. "And you're studying restaurant management, interesting choice. Not many opportunities there unless you know the right people." His tone made it clear he didn't think I did. Patricia, Alex's mother, was a former model who had aged gracefully and clearly worked hard to maintain her appearance. She assessed me with a quick up and down glance that took in my simple dress and minimal makeup. Her smile never reached her eyes as she commented, "What a unique look you have. So, ethnic." She spent the rest of the evening dropping subtle hints about the importance of presentation and the right social connections. Alex's older sister Stephanie was perhaps the most openly dismissive. A successful cosmetic dermatologist with her own practice, she seemed to view me as competition for family attention rather than a potential sister-in-law. "Restaurant management," she echoed when Alex proudly mentioned my major. "How quaint. I suppose someone has to make sure the servers bring the right dishes." She then turned the conversation to her recent European vacation and the celebrities she counted among her clients. Bradley, Alex's younger brother, was a financial analyst who measured everything and everyone by their earning potential. Throughout dinner, he peppered me with questions about projected income in the restaurant industry and seemed personally offended when I talked about passion rather than profit margins. "You'll never get rich working for other people," he informed me, as if I hadn't considered this. "The real money is in investments and equity." That first dinner set the pattern for all our future interactions. At every family gathering, the same questions would surface in different forms. "What exactly do you do? How much do you make? Don't you want something more stable?" When Alex and I announced our engagement, Patricia took me aside and said with false concern, "Darling, are you sure you can support the lifestyle Alex is accustomed to? Marriage is about partnership after all." The assumption that I would be financially dependent on Alex was constant and grating. At Christmas dinner the year after our wedding, Richard asked Alex about a promotion at his law firm, then turned to me. "And what about you, Marisol, still helping out at that restaurant?" The fact that I had been promoted to executive sous chef at one of the city's most acclaimed establishments was reduced to helping out. Even after I left that position to focus on planning my own restaurant, I kept details vague with Alex's family. I simply said I was working on a new project, which they interpreted as unemployment. Stephanie once remarked loudly at a family barbecue, "It must be nice to have the luxury of finding yourself while your husband pays the bills." What hurt most was that they never asked about my dreams or goals. They never inquired about the business plan I was developing, the investors I was meeting, or the culinary techniques I was perfecting. In their world, success had a very specific look, and it didn't include someone like me. Alex defended me fiercely, but respected my wishes not to share details about La Mesa de Marisol until it was established. "They'll eat their words one day," he would assure me after particularly difficult family encounters. "And hopefully some of your amazing food too." There was one incident that particularly stood out about 6 months before the restaurant opened. We were at Stephanie's house for her birthday dinner, catered by what she described as the best private chef in the city. The food was beautifully presented but bland and uninspired. As everyone raved about it, Stephanie turned to me. "This is what real culinary artistry looks like, Marisol. Chef Bernard trained in France and charges thousands per event. Maybe you could ask him for some career advice. I'm sure Alex wouldn't mind if you finally found something productive to do." I smiled politely while mentally comparing her exquisite risotto to the version I had perfected after months of testing different rice varieties, stock recipes, and cooking techniques. I could have pointed out the flaws in every dish served that night, but instead I complimented the chef and kept my thoughts to myself. That night, as Alex and I drove home, an idea began to form in my mind. I didn't need to convince his family of my worth through arguments or explanations. Eventually, they would see for themselves what I had built, but it would be on my terms and at the right moment. Someday, I told Alex, "Your family is going to walk into my restaurant without knowing it's mine, and that's when they'll finally see me for who I really am." Little did I know then how perfectly that scenario would play out. 6 months after that dinner at Stephanie's La Mesa de Marisol opened its doors. The first few months were challenging, as they are for any new restaurant, but word quickly spread about our innovative menu and impeccable service. By month 3, we were booked solid on weekends. By month 6, reservations had to be made weeks in advance, even for weeknights. Local food critics praised our bold flavors and technique-driven approach to Latin American cuisine. One prominent reviewer wrote, "La Mesa de Marisol doesn't just serve food. It offers a narrative of cultural confluence that is both intellectually stimulating and profoundly satisfying to the palate." As the restaurant's reputation grew, so did interest in the mysterious chef owner, who rarely gave interviews. This created exactly the buzz I had hoped for. People came for the intrigue, but returned for the food. I occasionally emerged from the kitchen to greet regular customers or special guests, but for the most part, I let my team handle the front of house while I focused on culinary innovation and operations. Alex couldn't have been prouder. He would often stop by after work, sitting at the bar and watching with undisguised joy as diners exclaimed over their meals. "You did it," he would whisper when I took brief breaks to sit with him. "You absolutely did it." His family, however, remained in the dark about my success. Alex and I had agreed not to volunteer information unless directly asked, and they rarely inquired about my professional life beyond vague questions that assumed I was still between jobs. Meanwhile, La Mesa de Marisol began appearing on best-of lists and attracting attention from national food magazines. A prominent food website named us one of the top 10 new restaurants in the country, and reservations became even harder to secure. We expanded our private dining options to accommodate the growing demand for special events and celebrations. It was around this time that Alex's family began mentioning La Mesa de Marisol in conversation, unaware of my connection to it. Stephanie had tried to get a last-minute reservation for a client dinner, but couldn't. "Apparently you need to know someone or book a month in advance," she complained during a family dinner. "I don't understand the hype around these trendy places." Bradley claimed to have heard about the restaurant from some finance guys who know good food, while Patricia mentioned that her book club friends were dying to try it. Richard, always concerned with status, noted that the city's mayor had been spotted there twice in 1 month. One evening, as Alex and I were relaxing at home after a long day, he received a call from his father. Richard's 60th birthday was approaching, and the family wanted to celebrate somewhere special. They had tried to get reservations at several exclusive restaurants but had been unsuccessful due to the short notice. "I've heard La Mesa de Marisol is exceptional," Richard said, "but apparently impossible to get into. Shame, as it would have been perfect." Alex muted the call and looked at me, eyebrows raised in a silent question. I nodded immediately, my heart racing with a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. This was the moment I had been unconsciously waiting for. "Actually, Dad," Alex said smoothly, "I might be able to pull some strings there. Let me see what I can do." After the call ended, we sat in silence for a moment before both bursting into nervous laughter. "Are you sure about this?" Alex asked. "You know how they can be." I took a deep breath. "Yes, I'm sure. It's time they saw what I've built. Besides, your dad deserves a special birthday dinner." Over the next week, I threw myself into planning the perfect evening. I reserved our best private dining room, designed a special tasting menu that showcased our most acclaimed dishes, and selected wines that complemented each course perfectly. I briefed our staff extensively, explaining the situation and asking them to treat me as just another guest until a specific moment. Maria, my trusted general manager who had been with me since day one, raised an eyebrow. You're going to let them think you're just Alex's unemployed wife until the big reveal. When I nodded, she grinned. Count me in. Some people need to learn their lessons dramatically. The night before the dinner, I barely slept. I kept running through scenarios in my mind, imagining their reactions when they realized the truth. Would they be embarrassed? Impressed? Would they try to save face or genuinely acknowledge my achievement? Part of me wanted to see them squirm after years of condescension, but another part simply yearned for recognition and respect. Whatever happens, Alex reassured me as we lay awake. Remember that you've built something extraordinary. Their opinions can't change that fact. I spent the day of the dinner at the restaurant personally inspecting every detail from the fresh flowers on the table to the special amuse-bouche I had created just for this occasion. I wanted everything to be flawless, not just to impress Alex's family, but to honor the milestone we were ostensibly celebrating Richard's 6 decades of life. As evening approached, I went home to change. I chose my outfit carefully, an elegant but understated black dress that wouldn't immediately signal my position at the restaurant. I wanted to blend in as a guest, initially allowing the evening to unfold naturally before the revelation. Looking in the mirror, I took a deep breath and reminded myself that regardless of their reaction, I had already succeeded beyond my wildest dreams. Alex squeezed my hand as we drove to the restaurant. Ready to blow their minds, or he asked with a supportive smile. As ready as I'll ever be, I replied, feeling like I was about to step on stage for the performance of a lifetime. We arrived at La Mesa de Marisol 30 minutes before Alex's family was due. I needed time to check in with my staff one last time and calm my nerves before slipping into the role of regular guest. The restaurant was already buzzing with the energy of a full house, the soft lighting casting a warm glow over the dining room. Maria greeted us at the entrance with a knowing smile. Everything is ready, Marisol. The private room looks stunning and Diego has the kitchen running perfectly. Diego, my talented sous chef, had been briefed to take the lead tonight while I played my part in the dining room. I walked through the main area, nodding discreetly to staff members who understood the plan. The space looked exactly as I had envisioned when I first designed it. Warm wood tones offset by deep blue accents, custom light fixtures, casting perfect pools of illumination over each table and floor-to-ceiling windows, offering views of the city lights. The restaurant was my canvas, and tonight it was displaying my finest work. The private dining room was separate from the main space, accessible through an archway lined with living plants. Inside, a single oval table was set for 6, with Richard's place at the head, marked by a subtle decorative element. Fresh flowers in copper vases complemented the hand-painted plates I had commissioned from a local artist. Each place setting was perfect, each crystal glass spotless. "It's beautiful," Alex whispered, giving my hand a squeeze. "They won't know what hit them." We returned to the main dining room just as Alex received a text that his family had arrived. Taking a deep breath, I switched modes from owner to guest, preparing to greet my in-laws, as if I hadn't just been inspecting every corner of the restaurant. They entered with the confidence of people accustomed to fine establishments. Richard led the way, scanning the room with an appraising eye. Patricia followed, elegantly dressed in what I recognized as this season's latest designer wear. Stephanie and Bradley came next, both looking polished and important. Alex, Marisol. Richard nodded as they reached us. "You managed to get us in after all. I'm impressed." His tone suggested that the accomplishment must have been all Alex's doing. "Happy birthday, Dad," Alex said, accepting his father's firm handshake before giving him a brief hug. "Wait until you taste the food. It's incredible." Patricia air-kissed both our cheeks, the cloud of her expensive perfume momentarily overwhelming. "The place certainly looks nice," she commented, glancing around. "Very contemporary." Stephanie immediately began comparing the decor to restaurants she had visited in Europe. "It reminds me of that place in Barcelona, though. Of course, that one had a 3-month waiting list and 2 Michelin stars." Bradley was already on his phone, presumably checking the restaurant's reviews and ratings. "Solid investment potential in this location," he noted. "Commercial real estate in this district has been outperforming the market." As the host led us to the private dining room, I caught snippets of admiring comments from other diners about dishes being served. pride swelled in my chest, temporarily displacing my anxiety about the evening ahead. The maitre d' who escorted us was Juan, one of my first hires, and now a key member of our team. He maintained perfect professionalism, showing no sign that he knew me beyond being a guest. "Mr. Montgomery, we're honoured to host your celebration tonight," he said smoothly. "Chef has prepared a special tasting menu for your party unless you prefer to order a la carte." "A tasting menu sounds perfect," Richard replied, clearly pleased by the special treatment. "And we'll want appropriate wine pairings, of course." As we settled into our seats, Patricia looked around the private dining room with grudging approval. "They've certainly paid attention to detail," she admitted. "Those flowers must have cost a fortune." "Not as much as you might think," I replied before I could stop myself. "Local flowers are often more beautiful and much more sustainable than imported ones." She gave me a patronizing smile. "Oh, Marisol, I forget you worked in service for a while. I suppose you do pick up these little facts." I bit my tongue as Juan returned with champagne to start our evening. After pouring each glass with practiced precision, he raised his own slightly. "To Mr. Montgomery on his 60th birthday and to his family, we wish you a memorable evening." As we clinked glasses, Stephanie leaned toward me across the table. "So Marisol, are you still between opportunities? It must be nice to have the freedom to accompany Alex to these business dinners on a weeknight." Before I could respond, Bradley jumped in. "Speaking of business, do you have any idea what a place like this pulls in annually? The overhead must be substantial, but with these prices and the location." He glanced at the menu and whistled softly. "I imagine the owner does quite well," I said carefully. Richard laughed. "More than quite well, I'd say. You know, in my day I could spot a good business opportunity a mile away. I should have invested in restaurants." "It's never too late, Dad," Alex said with a perfectly straight face, causing me to nearly choke on my champagne. The first course arrived, a delicate amuse-bouche of citrus-cured hamachi with avocado espuma and pickled jalapeno. It was a perfect representation of my culinary philosophy. Traditional ingredients transformed through technique while respecting their essence. "This is exquisite," Patricia said with surprise after taking her first bite. "The flavors are so clear." "Perfectly balanced," Richard agreed, looking impressed despite himself. "The acidity cuts through the richness beautifully." Even Stephanie nodded appreciatively. "Not what I expected. It's sophisticated without being pretentious." As the meal progressed through each carefully crafted course, I watched with growing satisfaction as Alex's family responded to my food. They didn't know they were complimenting my creations, my vision, my execution. Each enthusiastic reaction was a small victory, each clean plate, a silent acknowledgement of what I had achieved. Between the third and fourth courses, Patricia turned to me. "You should take notes, Marisol. Maybe you could learn to cook like this. It would be a productive hobby while you figure out your career path." I smiled politely while Alex nearly spat out his wine. "Marisol is quite busy with her own projects, Mum," he said after recovering. "Projects aren't careers, dear," she replied. "At some point, one needs to commit to something substantial." Richard nodded in agreement. "You know, I have some contacts in various industries who might be willing to meet with you, Marisol. Everyone needs a purpose, a way to contribute." "That's very kind," I said, maintaining my composure, "but I'm quite fulfilled by what I'm doing currently." Stephanie scoffed slightly. "Being fulfilled doesn't pay the bills. Alex can't support both of you forever, especially if you want children someday." Bradley, who had been studying the wine list, looked up. "Speaking of money, do you have any idea what this dinner is costing? I hope you appreciate that Alex can afford to bring you to places like this." The fifth course arrived just in time to prevent Alex from saying something he might regret. It was our signature dish, Akiote rubbed duck breast, with mole negro charred corn puree and pickled cherries. The presentation was stunning, with the deep red of the duck contrasting against the black mole and bright garnishes. "My God," Richard exclaimed after his first bite. "This is extraordinary. I need to meet the chef responsible for this dish." "The owner too," Patricia added, surprising me. "Whoever curated this experience understands luxury in its truest form." Stephanie was busy photographing her plate. "My followers will be so jealous. I've been trying to get a reservation here for ages." "Now I see why," Bradley admitted, momentarily forgetting to be critical. "This food justifies the hype." As they continued to praise each element of the dish, I felt a complex mix of emotions, vindication, pride, and a touch of sadness that it had taken this orchestrated reveal for them to see my capabilities. Alex reached under the table and squeezed my knee supportively, his eyes saying what words couldn't. The final savory course was served, followed by a pre-dessert palate cleanser that I had personally perfected over dozens of iterations. As the meal neared its conclusion, I could feel the moment of truth approaching. Juan appeared to inquire if everything was to their satisfaction. Beyond satisfaction, Richard declared. This has been one of the finest meals I've had anywhere in the world. Please convey my compliments to the chef and the owner if they're available. I'd like to personally thank them. I'll see if they're available, sir, Juan replied with a perfectly straight face. In the meantime, would you like to see the dessert options? As he described the dessert menu, I caught Maria's eye through the doorway. She gave me an almost imperceptible nod. The stage was set for the final act of our evening. The dessert course arrived a modern interpretation of tres leches cake with cajeta caramel toasted meringue and a delicate chocolate cage. It was my grandmother's recipe elevated through technique, but still carrying the soul of her kitchen. Accompanying each plate was a small edible chocolate plaque, wishing Richard a happy birthday in elegant script. This is incredible, Richard said, visibly moved by the personal touch. They've truly gone above and beyond. Patricia nodded in agreement. The attention to detail is remarkable. Whoever runs this place understands true hospitality. I've heard the owner is some hotshot chef from New York, Stephanie offered, scrolling through her phone. Can't seem to find much information, though. They're very private. Bradley sampled the dessert and raised his eyebrows in appreciation. Whoever they are, they're smart to create this air of mystery. Drives up demand, basic economics. As they continued to enjoy the dessert, I felt a subtle shift in the energy of the room. Juan appeared at the doorway, followed by Maria, carrying a small leather folio. This was the moment I had been anticipating and dreading in equal measure. Maria approached the table with professional warmth. Mr. Montgomery, on behalf of La Mesa de Marisol, we wish you a very happy birthday. We hope your celebration has been everything you desired. Richard beamed clearly, enjoying being the center of attention. It has been exceptional. Please thank everyone involved. I'd love to meet the owner and chef if possible. Of course, Maria replied with a subtle glance in my direction. In the meantime, here is your check for the evening. This was the deviation from our usual protocol. Normally, the check would be presented to whoever requested it, but Maria walked directly to me and placed the leather folio in front of me with a formal nod. As usual, Madam Owner, she said clearly, her voice carrying easily in the quiet room. Everything was prepared according to your standards tonight. The silence that followed was absolute. I could almost hear the mental gears turning as Alex's family processed what they had just heard. Richard's fork hovered halfway to his mouth. Patricia froze with her wine glass partway to her lips. Stephanie's eyes widened to an almost comical degree, and Bradley looked like he had been slapped. I calmly opened the folio, reviewed the zero balances planned, and signed my name on the line labelled Proprietor Approval. Then I closed it and handed it back to Maria with a warm smile. Thank you, Maria. Please extend my compliments to Diego and the kitchen team. They executed the menu beautifully tonight. I turned to face my in-laws, whose expressions ranged from confusion to dawning realization to mortification. Alex was watching the scene unfold with barely concealed delight. You're the owner, Richard finally managed to say, of La Mesa de Marisol. Yes, I replied simply. La Mesa de Marisol, my table, named after me. Patricia's mouth opened and closed several times before she found her voice. But you never said anything. All this time when we asked what you did. You never really asked, I corrected her gently. You assumed I did nothing of value because I didn't fit your definition of success. Stephanie's face had turned an impressive shade of red. The chef that created all this, that's you. Executive chef and owner, I confirmed. I have an excellent team, but yes, these are my recipes, my concept, my restaurant. Bradley looked between me and Alex, clearly recalibrating his entire perception. But how, when this place must have cost millions to launch? It did, Alex said, finally breaking his silence. Marisol secured investors, developed a business plan, found this location and transformed it. She's been working on this dream since before she met me. Richard seemed to be struggling to reconcile the Marisol he thought he knew with the successful entrepreneur sitting before him. Why didn't you tell us? I took a moment to consider my answer. Would you have believed me if I had? Or would you have assumed Alex was funding a hobby for his unemployed wife? The uncomfortable silence that followed was answer enough. At that moment, Diego appeared in his chef's whites. Sorry to interrupt, Marisol, but table 12 is asking to meet you. They're celebrating an anniversary. Thank you, Diego. I'll be right there. I turned back to the table. If you'll excuse me for a moment, chef duties call. As I stepped into the main dining room, I could feel the eyes of Alex's family following me. I greeted the anniversary couple warmly, chatting briefly about their meal and offering congratulations on their milestone. From the corner of my eye, I could see Richard, Patricia, Stephanie, and Bradley watching through the doorway, their expressions a mixture of shock and dawning respect. When I returned to the private room, the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. Gone was the condescension, replaced by an awkward attempt to regroup. Marisol, Richard began, his voice more humble than I had ever heard it. This restaurant is extraordinary, truly. I had no idea you had this kind of vision. Few people achieve this level of success in the restaurant industry, Bradley added, now speaking to me as he would to a peer rather than a dependent. The financials must be impressive. Stephanie, never one to be outdone, jumped in. The aesthetic is perfect, so sophisticated yet welcoming. You must have an amazing eye for design. Patricia reached across the table to touch my hand, a gesture she had never made before. Dear, why didn't you tell us? We would have been so proud. Would you? I asked quietly. Or would you have questioned every decision, suggested improvements, and reminded me of the failure rate for new restaurants? Their silence was telling. Alex cleared his throat. My wife didn't just create a successful restaurant. She's provided jobs for over 50 people. La Mesa de Marisol was named one of the top new restaurants in the country last month. There's talk of a James Beard nomination. As he spoke, other staff members began to appear, ostensibly to clear plates or refill water, but I knew they were coming to witness this moment of vindication. Maria, Juan Diego, and others who had been with me from the beginning, who had seen my struggles and shared my vision. Marisol has been here every day for the past 18 months, Diego added. From dawn until midnight, sometimes perfecting every dish, training every staff member, making sure every detail was right. A regular customer spotted me through the doorway and approached. Marisol, fabulous meal as always. We brought our friends from Chicago this time, and they're absolutely blown away. As more diners recognized me and stopped to offer compliments, the reality of my position became undeniable to my in-laws. This wasn't a fluke or a hobby. It was a serious, successful business that had earned respect in one of the most competitive industries. Richard made a valiant attempt to recover. Well, this calls for another toast, he declared, raising his glass. To Marisol, the brilliant entrepreneur we never knew we had in the family. The others quickly raised their glasses, murmuring agreement. I accepted their toast with grace, but I couldn't help noticing how quickly they had pivoted from dismissing me to trying to claim some connection to my success. Patricia was already mentioning how she always knew I had something special about me. Stephanie suddenly recalled how she had encouraged my interest in cooking. Bradley was hinting at investment opportunities for the next location. As the evening drew to a close, I felt a strange mixture of emotions: satisfaction at finally being seen, amusement at their transparent attempts to rewrite history, and a surprising touch of compassion for how limited their view of success had been. Alex leaned over and whispered in my ear, "Was it everything you hoped it would be?" I smiled, looking around at the restaurant I had built, the team I had assembled, and the family that was finally beginning to see me clearly. "Even better," I replied, "because now we can all move forward honestly." The weeks following that revelatory dinner brought noticeable changes in my relationship with Alex's family. The transformation wasn't immediate or complete, but there was a definite shift in how they interacted with me. The condescension was gone, replaced by an almost awkward deference that would have been amusing if it weren't so transparent. Richard was the first to reach out. He called me directly rather than going through Alex, which was unprecedented, and asked if he could stop by the restaurant to chat. When he arrived, I was in the middle of a staff meeting, but made time to see him in my small office at the back of the building. "Marisol," he began, seeming uncharacteristically uncertain, "I owe you an apology, a significant one." I waited, giving him space to continue without making it easier for him. "I've built my career on recognizing potential and talent," he went on, "yet I completely failed to see yours. I made assumptions based on prejudices I didn't even realize I held." His honesty surprised me. "What kind of prejudices, Richard?" I asked, not accusingly, but genuinely curious about his self-reflection. He sighed heavily. "About what success looks like. About who can achieve it. About the value of different industries. I saw the restaurant business as somehow less legitimate than corporate work. I was wrong, and my narrow-mindedness caused me to miss seeing the remarkable entrepreneur you are. I appreciated that he didn't try to excuse his behavior or diminish its impact. Thank you for acknowledging that, I said simply. I've spent my life in boardrooms and corner offices, he continued, but what you've built here takes as much skill, vision, and hard work as any business I've been involved with. More maybe because you did it without the advantages I had. We talked for almost an hour that day. For the first time, Richard asked genuine questions about my business, how I developed recipes, managed staff, handled suppliers. He listened without interrupting or offering unsolicited advice. At one point, he even took out a notebook and jotted down some thoughts. You know, he said as our conversation wound down, in my retirement, I've been looking for meaningful ways to stay engaged with the business world. If you ever need an advisor or someone to bounce ideas off, I'd be honored to help. Only if you want, of course. The offer was genuine, and I found myself considering it seriously. I might take you up on that, Richard, especially when we start looking at expansion opportunities. His eyes lit up, but he caught himself before jumping in with suggestions. Just let me know, on your terms when you're ready. Patricia's approach to reconciliation was less direct, but equally significant. She began by inviting me for lunch, just the two of us, at a small cafe nowhere near the caliber of my restaurant. A considerate choice that I appreciated. I've been thinking about our first meeting, so, she said after we had ordered. Do you remember what I said to you? You commented on my ethnic look. I replied not unkindly, but not sugarcoating it either. She winced. I was terrible, wasn't I? So concerned with appearances and so blind to substance. She reached across the table hesitantly. Marisol, I've never built anything of my own. My entire identity has been as Richard's wife, as Alex and Stephanie and Bradley's mother. When I saw you, young, beautiful, independent, with your own dreams, I felt threatened rather than inspired. Her vulnerability caught me off guard. Patricia, I never saw it that way. No, you wouldn't. You were too busy creating something magnificent while I was worrying about table settings and society gossip. She smiled ruefully. I'm trying to learn from you, if that's not too presumptuous. Over the following months, Patricia and I developed a tentative friendship. She took a genuine interest in my work, even volunteering to help with a charity event hosted at the restaurant. She introduced me to her social circle not as Alex's wife, but as the brilliant chef who owns La Mesa de Marisol. It was a small gesture that meant more than she probably realized. Stephanie's transformation was perhaps the most dramatic. After the birthday dinner revelation, she avoided me for several weeks, clearly embarrassed by her previous condescension. When she finally reached out, it was with a text that simply read, "Can we talk? I've been an awful sister-in-law." We met for coffee, and her usual polished facade was notably absent. She looked tired and genuinely contrite. I've been doing some soul-searching, she admitted. I built my practice on helping people feel confident about their appearance, yet I've been incredibly superficial in how I judge others. The irony isn't lost on me. We all have blind spots, I offered. Mine was the size of Texas, she replied with unexpected humor. I was so busy proving my worth to my father that I became exactly the kind of person I used to criticize, someone who values status over substance. Over time, Stephanie and I discovered common ground as women leading businesses in male-dominated fields. She began referring patients to my restaurant, and I helped cater an open house at her new clinic. There was a newfound mutual respect that, while still developing, felt genuine. Bradley took the longest to come around. His identity was so tied to financial success that he struggled to reconcile his previous dismissal of me with the profitable business I had built. When he finally approached me, it was with spreadsheets and market analyses. I ran the numbers on your restaurant, he said without preamble when he visited me at work one day. Your profit margins are impressive, especially for the industry. You've created significant value in a relatively short time frame. Coming from Bradley, this was high praise indeed. Thank you, I said, though there's more to it than the numbers. He nodded thoughtfully. I'm beginning to understand that. The loyalty you've built with both customers and staff. That's not something that shows up clearly on a balance sheet, but it's incredibly valuable. While our relationship remained the most formal of all my in-law connections, there was a new foundation of professional respect that hadn't existed before. The most meaningful conversation, however, was with Alex, after all the family drama had begun to settle. We were at home one evening enjoying a rare night off together when he turned to me with an expression of profound admiration. "You know what amazes me most," he said. "Not that you built this successful business. I always knew you would. It's how you handled my family through it all. You never lashed out, never stooped to their level, never even used your success to make them feel small when you finally revealed it." "What would that have accomplished?" I asked. "More division, more resentment. I didn't want revenge. I wanted recognition, but more importantly, I wanted authentic relationships." Alex pulled me close. "You've taught all of us something important. My family has always equated success with money and status, but you showed them that true success is building something meaningful, something that brings joy to others while fulfilling your own passion." In the months that followed, La Mesa de Marisol continued to thrive. We received a James Beard nomination, expanded our private dining options, and began exploring the possibility of a second location. Food magazines featured our innovative approach to Latin American cuisine, and I finally began doing selective interviews, sharing my journey and philosophy. At our 1-year anniversary celebration, I looked around the packed restaurant, at the diverse crowd enjoying my food, regular customers who had been with us from the beginning, food critics who had become friends, my dedicated staff who had helped make my vision a reality, and at a prominent table in the center, Alex's family, now genuinely proud to be associated with La Mesa de Marisol and its owner. The revelation at Richard's birthday dinner had done more than correct their misconceptions about me. It had sparked a deeper examination of how they defined worth, success, and family. For Richard, it meant reconsidering what legacy truly meant. For Patricia, it opened doors to a more authentic identity beyond her role as wife and mother. For Stephanie and Bradley, it prompted reflection on their competitive, status-driven approach to life. As for me, the experience taught me that sometimes the best response to being underestimated is not to argue or explain, but to excel so undeniably that no explanation is necessary. I learned that while external validation feels good, momentarily true, fulfillment comes from creating something that reflects your values and brings others joy. I also discovered something unexpected. Forgiveness is liberating. Holding on to resentment toward my in-laws would have diminished my own success. By allowing them the space to recognize their mistakes and change their behavior, I freed myself from the burden of proving my worth to them. The restaurant became a symbol of this transformation. Where once it had been a secret I kept from them, it became a place where our family bonds strengthened. Richard would stop by to chat with suppliers, drawing on his business expertise to help negotiate better terms. Patricia hosted her book club there, proudly giving behind-the-scenes tours. Stephanie and Bradley brought important clients beaming as they introduced me as their sister-in-law. 1 year after the revealing dinner, we gathered again in the same private room to celebrate Richard's 61st birthday. This time there were no pretenses, no hidden identities, no undercurrents of judgment. As I looked around at the family that had once dismissed me, now sitting comfortably in the world I had created, I realized that success isn't just about proving others wrong. It's about staying true to your vision even when others can't see it yet. It's about building bridges rather than burning them when vindication finally comes. In the end, the most powerful response to being underestimated isn't resentment or retaliation, but excellence and grace. My in-laws learned that appearances can be deceiving, that value comes in many forms, and that sometimes the person they least expect will be the one with the most to teach them. Have you ever been in a situation where someone completely underestimated you, only to be proven wrong later? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. If you enjoyed this journey of underestimation to vindication, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need a reminder that success is the best answer to skepticism. Thank you for joining me at my table today, and remember, the most satisfying meals are the ones that nourish both body and soul.